Good evening, and I call to order the meeting of January 25th, 2023 of the Calabasas City Council, regular City Council meeting. And tonight I'm joined by Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub, Council members Albrecht, Bazagian, and Kraut, as well as our city manager and staff. We're going to start tonight with Pledge of Allegiance by our newest council member who hasn't had that honor yet. That's Council Member Ed Albrecht to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a wonderful night tonight and a great meeting, some exciting discussion, and of course, some fantastic community members who are stepping up to become commissioners or continue their role. But before we do, in light of what's gone on in this past week, I'd like to ask us all to start this meeting all together with a moment of silence for all the families, loved ones, friends whose lives were torn apart this past week in at least 3 mass shootings in California within a very short period of time, in Oakland, in Half Moon Bay, and in our own almost backyard of Monterey Park, where 11 seniors were murdered and 10 were seriously wounded. And many of us may have connections with some of those families and individuals who are suffering. So I'd ask that we do our best, and we do. Calabasas is an amazing city when it comes to forward thinking. We are one of the first cities who put forward gun safety ordinances to protect our children in this community. And California is by far and away the strongest state when it comes to gun safety laws. I'm hoping we as a council and our community can come up with some creative solutions to help curb this terrible, senseless continuation of mass shootings in our area. And I'd ask you all to take a moment of silence in the memory of those lost. Thank you very much. And I would ask now for a motion to approve the agenda with a modification to remove consent item number 5.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, we'll move on to new business. Consideration and approval of appointments to the following for terms expiring November 2024. These are commissions, and we again appreciate all of your hard work, efforts, and volunteerism for the city and all of us. Arts Council Chair is Negan Ghaffari by Councilmember Weintraub via Zoom. Art and Public Places, the president or chair will be Laurel Ford. Communications and Technology Commission, Carrie Melcher. Environmental Commission. I'm seeing a question.
We're not on that. Are we?
We are. Item number 1 regarding appointments.
I'm looking at 4. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Okay.
interrupt you.
All right.
Okay.
Communication and Technology Commission, Carrie Melcher. Environmental Commission, Whitney Schwartz. Historic Preservation Commission, Michael Heumann. And another member will be here on February 8th as rescheduled. Parks, Recreation and Education Commission, Julie Elginer. And I see you. And Negan Ghaffari is via Zoom. And Charlotte Meyer is here in person. And we have a few more. Traffic and Transportation Commission, Jason Sperling Reich, and Heath Patton are in the front row. Very excited to start working. Library Commission, Julie Shai Sobel, and Agoura Hills Calabasas Community Center alternate, Marty Fadai. Are there any council comments before we proceed? Seeing none? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this particular item, either in person or online, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Seeing no hands raised, may I have a motion to approve these appointments? I'll move that.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Congratulations. Oh, not yet. Not yet. Just tricked you. Now we will ask all of you to stand and raise your right hand, and I will administer the oath of office to you. So I will do it from here. Repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Now we can congratulate you officially. Thank you all very much. You do not have to stay to the end of the meeting unless you really would like to. We'd love to have you. But thank you again for spending your time and putting forth your effort and your expertise to help make this a better city and a great place to live. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to presentations. We have LA County Fire Department. We welcome Chief Drew Smith to provide an update. Welcome, Chief. Good to see you.
So I want to say thank you to leadership with City of Calabasas, and we have a lot of good things going on in the fire department. First off, though, this is our 100-year anniversary, and so we're celebrating that. So we're excited about this year with 100 years of our Los Angeles County Fire Department. And your fire family is doing absolutely outstanding. We're maintaining a healthy workforce, and we are doing really good. Been busy as always, and we're doing good. A couple things I'd like to go over is yesterday we had a great meeting regarding Sheriff, City Calabasas, going over best practice with Zone Haven, Office of Emergency Management. And so the rollout and how this looks, I'd like to applaud the City of Calabasas for being on the front of how Zone Haven will work, how we're going to look at best practice, how it's going to be a learning endeavor. When we do have an emergency, we're going to see what worked, what didn't work. And if all goes good, that means we're missing something. So we're going to make it better. Chief Dyer gave me that one. I told him I'd throw him that one. So he's right. So we want to keep enhancing its abilities so we have a communication platform and information sharing on intelligence. So people that are within the areas can be informed. So it was a great tabletop exercise, or workshop, as I'd like to call it, from yesterday. Great collaborative effort. On February 2nd and 3rd, we have the governor's task force that's going to be in town, and that's on the wildfire resiliency. And so your Los Angeles County Fire Department is a cooperative member. So we are not the leads, we're a supportive member. There's going to be tours within the Santa Monica Mountains. One of those is our facilities, which is 69 Bravo, which is at the top of Saddle Peak, which is one of the only place in the world that has a static water source, has a resiliency plan in place for watershed management. So we're excited to show that to the governor's office so they can see how we are doing our part on the wildfire resiliency, infrastructure protection, wildlife management, and the environmental concerns with that. So we're excited about that. And with that, just want to say that our collaborative efforts with the Lost Hills Sheriff Station with under the leadership of Captain C2. We talk all the time. We're looking at best practice for emergencies in the all-risk environment with notifications, zone haven, evacuations. Hate to say it, but active shooter, we communicate this routinely so we can have be proactive rather than reactive. So a lot going on within public safety with your fire and law partners. And with that, is there any questions for me?
Are there any council comments or questions? Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub.
Just a thank you for everything that you and your team are doing.
Well,
We
thank you.
appreciate how proactive you're being and the communication you have with the city. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the support.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, I want to thank you very, very much. I mean, life changed for us when we had Woolsey. We've grown and all the services that are involved have really come together as a unified force. I think we're really beyond the precipice of being in as good a shape we could possibly be. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And I also want to take a moment to thank you and look forward to seeing you next, actually February 2nd, when you're presenting to the HOA presidents here to further continue safety practices for the city. And thank you very, very much. Just a quick question. Do we have an idea of when Zone Haven officially will be available to residents in the city?
So it's available now through Zone Haven. So you can go to the Zone Haven Aware and you can look at where you're at, and it's very intuitive. So I would suggest that the residents go to Zone Haven Aware, look at navigating the site, and then it will become active. If we have an emergency, we have the ability to make it active. And like we did yesterday on what we're going to put measures in place internally through all the cooperative agencies to get the unified message out. So it's live now.
And I think I got a notice that those actions were taken or being taken, even in light of the 4.2 earthquake right down in Malibu.
So that is an option that we have. If we need to utilize Zone Haven for the all risk incidents, we can utilize that platform for information.
Thank you very much. And
Yeah,
thank
you
you.
bet. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to ask Maury, are there any members of the public who have questions or comments here and are online? I see one resident. So please come, if you would, to the podium.
Well, that's okay. I can handle over here.
We're all interested. Tell us who you are and where you live, please.
I'm Elizabeth Cortez and I live on Roofwood in Calabasas.
Okay.
And my question was, do you have an app or is this just on the website, for Zone Haven?
So I'm not familiar with the app component.
Oh, okay.
We will, I was going to say, we will provide, if that will help.
Yeah,
Our
we can
media
get that
department will provide you with that
If there's an app
information.
Platform for that.
Yeah.
If there is, I'm not familiar with it. I haven't used it, but we can make that resource available for sure. If it is a thing, we could do that.
Okay, because apps are great.
They are.
Go ahead. Yeah, it is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If I could answer that. So the app hasn't been fully developed. It's being tested right now in beta form and is expected to roll out probably in the next couple months.
Okay.
So, and that's coming through Zone Haven. But once we do that, we'll be notifying residents through our social media that app is available and encouraging residents to know your zone and then download the app.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments or online questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, we have two hands raised, and I'm going to have to ask them if they're on this item. I don't believe so, but I'll ask them.
Okay. In the meantime, again, I'll add. a big
Andrea
thank you.
or Marisol, if you're speaking on this item, please keep your hand up. If not, please lower it. It looks like Andrea wants to speak. We'll bring her in.
I was trying to speak earlier, but you didn't have the option available to interject. So I've lost.
Can you please, sorry to interrupt. Can you please tell us your name and where you're from?
Andrea, and I'm from Montanito.
Okay. And what item is it was it this item you wanted to speak on or something different?
No, it wasn't turned on. She didn't have it available for us to respond until right now. So
Right.
Is this regular public comment, Andrea? Because we're not there yet. If you want to speak on regular public
I
comment.
know, but earlier when we all could have spoke and make a vote, you continued without it being turned on. So, that time's over and just letting you know. there wasn't a chance to respond.
Ma'am, no vote has been taken except to approve the agenda. I would recommend you make
No,
your
there
comment to
was
the
a comment.
general
There
public
was There
comment.
was a comment earlier about all the people being sworn in.
Yes, and with the permission of my colleagues, if you wish to make a comment in that regard, is that agreeable at this point?
Regarding the commission sworn in, that'd be fine. Assuming the council.
Andrea, and can you please give us your last name also?
Elliot,
Okay, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes. And thank you, Chief Dyer.
I was going to ask how one from the community can participate. And that was going to be my question, to volunteer for positions like those.
Okay, I'm going to ask if it's appropriate, if you could reach out to our city clerk, Mari Hernandez, who will provide you that information
Thank you.
going forward, because we oftentimes have open opportunities. Thank you very much. Okay, all right. Any other public comments online?
No more, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. Now we'll move forward to the next item, which is a proclamation recognizing January as Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And we are doing this along with other cities, counties in LA County and so forth. I'm going to read this quickly. It states, whereas human trafficking, whether in the form of forced labor, sex trafficking, or other offenses, is an abhorrent abuse of power and profoundly immoral crime that strikes at the safety, health, and dignity of millions of people worldwide. And whereas every year, 1.2 million children are exploited around the globe. And whereas human trafficking is growing throughout the United States, thriving in cities across geographic and socio-demographic variability and nationally. And whereas the criminal enterprise of human trafficking is second only to the illegal drug trade in terms of the speed of its growth and being among the most lucrative. And whereas human trafficking significantly threatens the safety and well-being of child victims, some as young as infants and vulnerable adults being purchased, as well as their families, the families of buyers, legitimate businesses, and our communities. And whereas as a decent and responsible society, we must each support all levels of law enforcement by reporting such crimes and work to strengthen laws that will send an unwavering message to any who attempt to profit from human trafficking. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Calabasas does hereby proclaim January 2023 as Human Trafficking Prevention Month and call upon businesses, civil society organizations, communities of faith, families, and all Americans to recognize the vital role we play in combating human trafficking and to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities aimed at preventing all forms of human trafficking nationwide. And even though we're presenting this tonight, it is something that we don't need to just do in 1 month. It should be something year round. Are there any council comments, please? Okay, seeing none. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, either in person? Seeing no hands raised, and members of the public?
No one on Zoom,
Online?
Mr. Mayor.
All right. I think we will move on then to announcements. Thank you for that. We'll start with Councilmember Albrecht.
Thank you very much, Mayor Shapiro. And I'm a little short on the announcements, but one very, very important one, and that's concerning the Calabasas Chamber of Commerce. And they have their gala installation this Saturday night at Calabasas Country Club. And those of you that haven't experienced it, they'll find it to be very, very special. I know what these events are like. Mayor Shapiro is going to be presiding in some form. And their special event, they're going to be honoring Kathleen Sterling, who's the publisher of the Calabasas Enterprise. We get that newspaper on our driveway every Friday. It's newsworthy, and she's been doing this for years. It's really she's a terrific woman, and I'm excited for her. And then I thought I would give you some local news about the Regency Theater, because we're trying to encourage people to come and go to the movies and keep that open. So for those of you that don't know, Way of the Water is one of the featured movies, $2 billion already worldwide. Puss in Boots for the kids, The Last Wish, 300 million globally, and MG GAN, I hope I'm saying that right. It's an AI life-like doll, kind of like a child companion. So from what I've heard, the kids really love it. So let's keep the Regency open. Please attend it.
Thanks very much. Councilmember Bazagian.
Wanted to invite everybody on January 30th at 6 p.m. to a virtual meeting to discuss the Agoura Hills Calabasas Community Center repairs and programming there in the future. As has been previously discussed, City of Calabasas is now renting out the facility from the Community Center Board. And so we will be running the programming from the City of Calabasas and our Community Services Department. We appreciate your input on January 30th and also to learn more about the timeline and how the roof repairs will be accomplished. So please join us. If they want to join us virtually, where is the link to do that? Is that on the city's website directly on the front?
That's correct.
Okay, so just go to the front of the city's website.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kraut.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to remind everybody that the drought unfortunately is still not over. We had some great rains in the last month. Very excited to see we're doing a little bit better than we were this time last year. But if anybody is considering a move in their landscaping to move towards drought tolerant plants, now's a great time to be planting them. In a little bit of research myself, I've come across that when you're getting rid of your grass and moving towards drought tolerant ground covers, there's a tendency to spray Roundup and other toxic chemicals to kill off the last of the remaining grass. And there are alternatives out there. So I encourage everyone to reach out to places like the Organic Materials Review Institute, which lists products such as an ammonium no nanoate, which is an organic material for killing weeds that has a half-life of less than a day, which means it's not going to make it into our groundwater system. A lot of things we need to do to be proactive and to be ready for this coming summer. So certainly if you're considering that switch, now's the time to be looking into it. And I want to acknowledge that our city's done a great job in transitioning a lot of our landscapes to native drought tolerant plants. And we're trying to set the example. So please join us.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub.
Thank you. My announcements and comments are not as happy as everyone else's, but I don't want to leave this moment without reflecting on what has happened in the last 25 days. It's only January 25th. And so far in 2023, there have been 39 mass shootings in just 1 month. And we all watched last weekend as the horror unfolded in Monterey Park, where people were jubilantly celebrating the Lunar New Year. Then we watched farm workers in Half Moon Bay and students in Iowa that hardly even made the news. And the list of people goes on. And as elected officials, we have to comment. We have to speak up. Everyone out here has to do their part because this has to stop. I mean, Monterey Park, sitting there and watching our colleagues from the county, our sheriff there. I mean, that was in our backyard. And it's just luck that it hasn't happened here. And as Mayor Shapiro said, we're doing everything we can, but more has to happen. And it's all of our responsibility to speak up and demand more so that we don't become a statistic in this community and that we can protect all of those out there. So I just ask everyone's support in doing whatever we can and taking action and supporting action at the state and federal level. On another not so happy thought, James and I participated last night in the homeless count, and I see Julie Elginer was there who participated. We had Michael McConville from staff and Gabriel Graham, our COG homeless outreach coordinator, and Terry Dipple, the executive director of the COG. And unfortunately, it was a very chaotic process. So as wonderful as it was to have all of the volunteers, it was actually a very sad state of affairs that the organization that is tasked with eradicating homelessness in LA County could not even have their act together for a homeless count. The event was supposed to start at 6 o'clock. We didn't go out till 8 o'clock, but the bigger issue, and I suspect this is going to happen countywide, is the maps that they gave us in Calabasas were for gated communities. They wanted us to go and Hidden Hills. Our map showed that we were supposed to go through Hidden Hills. And they had a very complex app that wasn't even fully functioning. So there were a lot of issues. So I think that as a council, we have to really monitor the data for Calabasas and the other neighboring communities, because part of the documents that were given out last night were for Agoura and Westlake, and it was a pretty big mess. I don't know if other people felt that way, but our team definitely did. So I wanted to make that comment. But on a little bit more of a positive note, on February 2nd, we are having a workshop or a forum with the HOAs and our public safety officials, where we're going to focus on topics related to public safety, specifically open space burglaries and a lot of other things. So Mayor Shapiro and myself as our public safety liaisons will be there, as well as our public safety commissioner, chair and vice chair. And everyone is welcome to attend, but the invitation went out to the HOAs throughout the community. So hopefully there's a representative from each neighborhood. And so we're really excited to make progress on that to keep our community safe. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for your words too. Just a separate note on what you said. It doesn't always seem that far away. I met my wife, and she grew up in Monterey Park, about a block and a half from where that shooting took place, and found out last night that one of her good friends and classmates' mother was among those who lost due to the mass shooting. So even though it's 30 miles away, 25 miles away, 40, it doesn't matter. It affects everyone, and is important to do anything we can to help stop it. On a positive note, Calabasas High School yet again was in the news. The College Board provided Calabasas High School being in the top 3% of all schools in the country for female enrollment in AP computer science principles. One of 832 schools that was recognized for female diversity in computer science and principal courses. That goes along with all the other accolades and awards. And I'm sure there are a lot of victories on the sports fields, but I won't go into those tonight. Again, the Las Virgenes Unified School District this week is at all the schools in the district, not just ours, but ours as well, are participating in Kindness for Kate events everywhere from elementary to high schools. And that is for former Las Virgenes Unified School District board member and former CHS PFC president, Kate Videra as well. And so you'll see, if you have children in the district, grandchildren, friends, kids, you'll see them doing some wonderful things. And we can all do kindness year round, not just now. So thank you for doing that. We'll move on to oral communication and public comment. And I have some speaker cards here. If you wish to speak on any matter not on the agenda, please fill out a speaker card if you're here and provide it to our city clerk, Mari Hernandez, and we'll provide you up to 3 minutes to speak on any matter whatsoever. And I will start with the in-person individuals. And the first one is Mark Levinson, our fantastic chamber leader. And I believe he has, unless there are going to be separate comments, you're bringing up Salvador Plasencia and Trang Pham, if I got the names right, I hope.
Mayor, it's my pleasure, council members, to introduce two new members of the Chamber of Commerce who are already active in the community. Many of you were at the grand opening of Doctor's facility. And I also urge you to meet Tran, who's opening a new office. It's Sugaring NSC there in the Summit. She's a new member, will be very active. And it's my pleasure to introduce new people who are active in our community, not just the new members of the chamber. So Tran, I'll introduce you first.
Thank you for having me here today. So I'm so happy to join. And then I just recently opened last 3 months ago for Sugary NYC, just a body hair removal, all organic. And then it's friendly, environmental friendly too. Feel free to check it out. I'm close by the Summit area where is the Horn Market is. Thank you for having me here.
Welcome, welcome.
Hello again. I'm here to introduce Malibu Canyon Urgent Care. We are a new facility, opened about a month and a half ago. We're about a quarter mile north of the 101, and we're here to make a big impact in the community. We have all the typical tools of a medical clinic, such as an X-ray, stat X-ray, a full medical lab, IV nutrition, and on-site medications that are given complimentary with every visit. And so thank you for the opportunity to introduce this urgent care.
Welcome. And I was going to mention, I should have done it in announcements, but Councilmember Kraut, Albrecht, and myself were there along with the chamber for wonderful ribbon cutting, and hope you're both very successful in the city and active.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say, I look forward to seeing all of you Saturday night at our installation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And are there any other public comments or online?
Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, I have Marty Fadai.
Okay, Marty Fadai, newest alternate member to the community center.
Good evening, everybody. And I just would like to thank every single one of you, every member in the community and city councilor. I wrote a little note, so I'm going to read it very quickly. It says, to thank every single one of you for your trust and opportunity and unconditional love you have given me. And I wish I could be a better servant and humble myself and honored to serve the city I love the last 25 years. And thank you so much. And thank you for your support and your leadership. That's it.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, on Zoom, we have Marisol Espinosa.
Okay. I believe, hi. I believe you're with SoCal Gas, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor
Welcome.
Shapiro. Good evening, City Council members and residents of Calabasas. Can you hear me okay? I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I also will be at the Calabasas Chamber on Saturday night, but I'm actually here just to provide information on your winter gas bills, which I know have been shockingly high. And, there's a number of factors that are contributing to that higher gas bill. Usually around this time of year, people are using more gas because it's been, because of the cold weather. But really what's driving those high prices right now are the high natural gas prices in the Western United States. SoCal Gas doesn't set the price for natural gas. It's determined by national and regional markets, and we buy that gas in those markets on behalf of residential and small business customers, and that is a direct pass through to the customer. We don't profit from the gas commodity prices going up. Some of the other factors contributing to those higher prices include widespread below normal temperatures on much of the West Coast, including Washington and Oregon, the high demand for heating by customers in areas with below normal temperatures. We've seen reduced natural gas supplies to the West Coast from Canada and the Rocky Mountains, and reduced interstate pipeline capacity to the West Coast because of pipeline maintenance activities in West Texas. We're sharing information on how to reduce energy bills by lowering your thermostat 3 to 5 degrees if your health permits, installing proper caulking and weather stripping, which could save roughly 10 to 15% on heating and cooling bills, washing your clothes in cold water, reducing the temperature on your water heater, and limiting the use of non-essential natural gas appliances such as spas, pool heaters, and fireplaces. You can visit socalgas.com/manage higher bills for more information. And for customers, we know that they're seniors, and there are customers who might have a hard time paying their bills. And so we would encourage you to seek out some of our bill assistance and forgiveness programs, home improvement assistance, and looking at our level pay program. We also have a gas assistance fund, which is a program that helps customers pay their natural gas bills. And to learn more, you can visit socalgas.com/assistance. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And, we're just here to share information, and can also, our call center will also help you review your bill and look at opportunities for savings and assistance. Happy to be here tonight. I wish I had better news, but it's great to see you, and I hope to see you all in person soon.
And thank you for your comments. I appreciate them. My understanding, there's a number of individuals, I believe, who wanted this. And I believe you've been speaking with our city manager about coming to present to council so we can have some back and forth in a future meeting, if I'm correct. Is that right, Kendra? Or is that right, Marcel?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, we would certainly welcome you, because I know there's a lot we all want to discuss, and residents can be more and more informed, and that's appreciative. Thank you for coming. Okay. Are there any other
Thank you.
individuals online wishing to speak?
No, Mr. Mayor, no more comments.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to consent items 3 through 8. Do any of my colleagues wish to pull any consent items?
I'd like to pull item 8.
Okay, item 8 is pulled. Any others?
Not to pull it, but to recognize that during our agenda setting at the beginning of the meeting, one of those items has been removed, correct?
Yes, item 5.
Thank you.
Any other items? Okay, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub, on item number 8.
My thoughts regarding item number 8, that this is a great opportunity for the city to look at a more innovative demand response program, something more environmentally friendly, like a clean energy vehicle. And I just thought, since we're relooking at the program, which we're so appreciative of, as Robert knows, this has been an issue of concern for everyone, the empty trolley going around. So we really appreciate everything in this report. I appreciate I brought up the circuit idea and the back and forth dialogue on how that wouldn't work. But I just think there's so many advances in transportation technology that this might be our opportunity to explore something more innovative. So that's why, if there wasn't a time sensitive reason for us to vote on this, I would just ask if we can come back with some other options. That's why I wanted to pull it.
Well, thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I was going to say council member, but member of council and public. First of all, I want to introduce Treya Bzadi. She's assistant engineer who's in charge of Dial-A-Ride public transit program. And I got to give her the credit. One of the things that happened, I admit it, one day Kinden called me and said, Robert, your shuttle on Saturday, 6 p.m. empty running around. And I did admit that the shuttle wasn't as successful. It had ridership. So when I discussed the matter with Treya, she came up with a great idea. Is exactly what you're talking about. Now we are having a new program. I'm not going to take it away. And also she's looking for grants, and we will be successful. We start some communication. So I'll let Treya quickly explain that. I don't want to take a lot of time, but this program is like a pilot program on the weekend, open to all. Almost, I'll let Treya explain it. It's better. I promise her not take away from her. So Treya.
Yes, so as Robert is saying, it's a pilot program. This is a great opportunity for us to see what kind of interest in the community there is for a program like this. The main reason we went about it this way is it would be the easiest to implement this program as the pilot while looking at it as it happens, as people use it, we can be able to have a better idea of how to move forward with it. Big thing, like you mentioned, is doing clean energy. And that is the number one thing that I'm working on right now, is with CARB and all of the new requirements for all electric vehicles. I'm required to implement a ZEV, zero emission vehicle rollout plan, by June. So that is something that will be presented to council probably in May. And that part of that is this demand response program, looking at what we can do with our current contractor to require them to go all electric, and what we could do potentially with something more like a circuit, where we have another third party that provides that option for us.
Does anyone else have a comment or question on this item? Councilmember Kraut.
Yeah, my only question on this would be the item was to allow an amount up to approximately $750,000 for a 3-year contract. Would we need to use up all of those services if we have this pilot program take success? Would our contract with this service now with the dial-a-ride lock us into using all of that, or would we be able to cancel that partway through?
You will be able to cancel that. There is a language in the contract. City attorney was very helpful with that. With 30 days notice, that will be terminated. That's why the dollar amount is not to exceed, and we are utilizing Prop A and C.
Thank you.
Any
I
other
would confirm
council-
that. That is correct. We have 30-day termination option, which could be used if we identify alternative sources.
At any time.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the city's option.
Can we look at other options before adopting this? I mean, I'm just curious, like, there's so many advancements right now with like new on-demand services. I'm just wondering what else is out there. So we can look at what's available, or is that not, or is your recommend? I mean, I just think we have this great option to do something great. I'm not saying this isn't great, but maybe and I appreciate all the work you've done on this, but maybe there's something else out there that other communities that's just might be better right now than.
We can look into it. What's going on now? We want to stop this weekend big bus driving around empty. Right now, the dial-a-ride vehicle will be staged at east side and west side, and depending on the car, they will move. So it becomes like a immediate response, almost like Uber service. And when we discuss it with Treya, it's just pilot program, trying it while we are looking at apps and other potential programs. As you emailed us, we immediately look into those circuit, and there is a couple of other programs that they're not implemented yet. So this tryout, as Treya mentioned, we really want to see what is the demand in our community first on the weekend. Then we will roll it up on weekdays too. So the dial-a-ride will transition with clean vehicle to regular 6-7 days program as on demand needed. Right now will be mainly tryout. And as we mentioned, if it doesn't work, we will stop the program.
I was just wondering if we could like pause even just for like a few weeks just to get some more information on some other programs that might be out there so that we could invest all our energy into a program that could be like wildly successful, and working with like Michael and his team and promoting it to the community. I want to make sure we're doing it right. And there's just so many new things out there.
There is no urgency, but we will stop using the trolley or big bus on the weekend. That's, and as it's mentioned, Treya did a good job. It's going to be even cost saving while we are looking for the alternative. But if the council desire to hold the program, we continue what we are doing. We will do investigation and research of what else we can do. We will come back to council.
This might be the best. I don't know. I just wanted to see some other options. But I don't know how my colleagues feel.
My only comment, these are great services and the community has benefited tremendously from it. I like creative ways to use the trolley, but they haven't been forthcoming so far, but we're going to come up with some, I know. I like the idea that, as Matt mentioned, and you mentioned, that 30 days we can go ahead and cancel. So if we're looking at alternatives, I would say, if council wants to, and I know you do, Mayor Pro Tem, to start looking at alternative sources, alternative options, more clean vehicles during this time. And we can do that immediately while still implementing this with a 30-day cancellation option. So that would be my only comment. Anyone else? Councilmember Oliver.
I can agree with Mayor Pro Tem, but I also feel very bad when we're all residents here and we see the trolley drive around many, many times empty. And it just seems a sad waste of energy and time and efficiency. And I'd like to experiment with a new plan. I like the idea. And if it doesn't work, we'll find another one. We'll see how it works or maybe improve on it or modify it, but it's a good starting point.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just if I can, one more question. The services that we're looking at in this contract, when do our current services expire? When do we need to renew this contract in order to maintain seamless transportation?
I can look at the contract. The weekend service, if you're talking about the big trolley driving around, that's with different service provider. We already notify them and we can stop that again based on the exact same contract, 30 days notice. And we already put the notice because we took this item to Child Transportation Commission and we had input from them. So that program, we notify them that may stop as of February 1st, and they're very cooperative because they have other services that they provide us. With Dial-A-Ride, we have one more year that we're doing Dial-A-Ride only. So this is a new and totally creative solution. We had several meetings with them. They're willing to do a pilot program startup and see how successful it will be so they can expand on it. And as Treya mentioned, one of the vehicles is getting high mileage. One of the negotiation will be that they convert that vehicle to electric vehicle. So Treya is looking at that program. She will come back. And we didn't want to give it away, but she's writing at least 3 different grants that I know. And we've been lobbying with FTA, with county, with Metro, and they really like Calabasas because we are always ahead of the other cities, and we become a pilot program or role model for other cities. And we will still, even though we implement this one, doesn't mean we'll stop. We say how this one works. We immediately, me and Treya, start looking at other cities, and there's other creative solution in other area beyond California that we are looking into it to see what else is out there that will benefit our city. But at the same time, we got to understand the need of our community. I mean, this program is a little bit restricted. It has to stay within boundary of the city, as you can see with the funding. And also we explained it that this will be expansion of Dial-A-Ride for the weekend. They have a lot of seniors that they love the program. They use it. We had 0 complaint for the last 3-4 years. Treya, correct me because you get all the calls.
I do not get any Dial-A-Ride complaints.
It's amazing.
So I'm sorry, I got to get back to that question. I appreciate the answer and the explanation of the services and what we want to do in the future here. But the contract that we have in front of us was dated July 1, 2021 to June 30, 2024.
Correct.
So what is the urgency of signing this now? Is that not still a valid contract we can continue with?
We are expanding on that for a weekend service. So Dial-A-Ride will remain exactly the same way it is. On the weekend now, we are opening it to all. And it will be Saturday, Sunday program. You make a phone calls. I need a ride from my place. So they come to your home. So you don't even have to go to the stop location.
And when will that weekend program begin?
As soon as this council authorize it, then we will promote it. We've been talking to our media to help us out with it, and we will start advertising it and see how successful it will be.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Albrecht.
Yeah, I think you hit a very important point, and that is the success of any program. It can be very successful on paper, but not in actuality. So communicating it and letting people know that it's available is a big deal. So maybe have some handouts on the trolley as people come on so they'll know what the future is going to be or an option. But we got to communicate it.
Correct. As soon as we know that the council is authorizing the program, the next step is going to Michael Russo. We're going to have a 2-minute advertisement. We will contact all the users that we have on the bank, and also we advertise it that the weekend program is different than Jolly Trolley going around, is on call to Ideal Services, and people will have access to that number, and we're going to see how that's going to work. We even had in mind to use some of the resident as a tryouts, a call, see how the program works, how long it takes. So they're just testing it to see is it successful or not.
How will people pay?
Treya?
Through the current dial-a-ride method, they have ability to do cash or card in the vehicle. So currently there is no app, and that is something that I am looking into a grant for because that'll help with the accessibility of it. But currently it is a call in to request the service, and then in the vehicle is where you can pay with cash or card.
And what's the minimum age that someone can use it?
We don't have in our
It has to have an adult, so a young kid cannot use it. So we
So
will be
18.
requiring adult 18 years old to accompany a younger one. And again, a 17 years old called and is a real right. We always tell the dial right to use their judgment. And also, I was explaining it when we were talking, we did have some abuse too, that people just abuse the system. So since we haven't done tryout on this weekend right, we really don't have exact data at this point, but the service provider is cooperative and they're willing to try it out and see how it's going to work.
And it'll go up to the orange line on Canoga?
Yes.
Okay, that's the one else, the boundary outside of the city. So I'm fine to support it if I could ask my colleague that you still come back with alternatives, maybe when this program goes into effect, you come back with numbers and also other options of something more innovative, if that's acceptable to my colleagues.
That.
Okay.
And I would support that as well. And I'm assuming it'll take a couple months to get the numbers to us. But in the meantime, work on the grants and go ahead and bring us some even better options.
Back in April with report, and by then we should have our findings and what else we can do, and also conversion of the vehicle to clean.
Great. And I know Trey is good at the research, so I have no doubt we'll find something great for the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this item? Okay, then I will ask Mario, or anyone in the public, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on any of the consent items?
Mr. Mayor, we have Andrea again with her hand raised.
Okay, and Andrea, welcome.
It's taking a while to bring her in.
Okay.
Go ahead, Andrea, if you're in. Oh, she lowered her hand.
Okay, maybe it's on the next.
No, I didn't. I'm in.
There she is.
Thank you. So I looked up dial-a-ride online because I wanted to see what the age was before you had asked that question. And it says Calabasas residents who are 65 years of age or older or have a permanent disability. Or it doesn't say or, have a permanent disability or have a serious medical condition. So it's not 18 and over.
Correct. So that is our dial-a-ride operation. What we are proposing now would be separate from dial-a-ride. It would be a public demand response program open to 18 plus, only on the weekends. And this would, so yes, the dial-a-ride is the 65 plus. This would be separate from that. We are just utilizing the existing contract and the existing vehicles while we come back with more innovative options.
Thank you for the clarity. I know some people that could benefit from this that aren't 65. So thank you for clarifying that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you to staff as well. Any other public comments? Anyone online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then I will ask, may I please have a motion to approve consent items 1 through 4 and 6 through 8? So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes 5-0. Now, we're at a point now, we have one item of new business to discuss. Does any council member wish to take a brief break, or should we continue on? I saw a nod, which was
continue on.
Okay. All right. If anyone needs, you'll let me know. We will move on to item number 9, discussion of options available to the city to authorize commercial cannabis activities and land uses. And we have Michael Klein here, but I believe our city manager wishes to kick this one off.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your time in considering this item. What you have before you is really a request from staff to get direction regarding cannabis operations within the community. As the council is aware, and Michael will cover this a little bit more in his presentation, in 2020, the city council and the community adopted a resolution and an ordinance, and then by vote, enacting a tax on cannabis businesses. That tax was not, or is in essence silent at this point because of the lack of businesses operating in the community. However, there has been interest over time in the last couple of years coming into our community development department by business owners and others who have expressed a desire to see cannabis businesses in the community. With that, again, this item is clearly for direction from the council, and to put it in kind of a little framework of what we'd hope to see from the council tonight is direction on one of three options. One would be no action, or in essence, keeping the status quo. Two, to move forward with a process of an ordinance that would allow cannabis operations. That would be with the understanding that at any time the council could stop that process. So just by asking to move forward does not mean that it's a done deal. It just allows staff to continue to devote resources and time to the research and required for such an ordinance. And then number three, the council may decide that they're not ready to decide on this and request that this be tabled for a future date, or that more community engagement is done to assess input from the community and businesses in the chamber or so forth, or to perhaps even entertain it with one of our commissions. So again, three different options that we're looking at direction on: a status quo of doing nothing, number two, moving forward, or three, just tabling it or pausing to get more information. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Michael Klein and we'll proceed. But thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Shapiro, members of the City Council. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I can get a PowerPoint presentation up. And before I begin, I do want to point out that we have received one public correspondence that was submitted by email. I do believe that that email was forwarded to the City Council. So with that, I will jump into the PowerPoint presentation. Overall, what I want to cover tonight is, sorry. Thank you, technical services. What I want to cover tonight under the discussion for the commercial cannabis is first just to go over what the overall regulations are. So we can I can give the council a high level overview of what the state law and local regulations, how that pertains to commercial cannabis. From there, I'm going to cover the options that are available to the City Council as it relates to commercial cannabis, and some key factors for the council to consider if that's the direction of the City Council. And then finally, as the city manager just discussed, we're hoping to get some direction from the City Council on either to stop and not move forward or how to move forward. So with that, I want to go over just a quick timeline of cannabis regulations within California, which effectively started back in 1996. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but where we're at today is that cannabis is a legal product in the state of California. I'm not going to talk about the federal law because that's not what's on this discussion tonight, but from a California state standpoint, cannabis is a legal product. It can be sold legally, it can be delivered legally, and it can be consumed legally for medical purposes and for adult use. The highlights out of this slide that I want to point out is that from a local control standpoint, while the state can issue permits for commercial cannabis activities, the state cannot issue a license if that license is in conflict with a local ordinance or local regulation. It's also important to note that the state allows for vertical integration of cannabis activities. So that'll make a little bit more sense as I go through this slide further along, or the PowerPoint. And finally, through this timeline, through this process, at one point in time, there were 3 different licensing agencies at the state level, and that's all been consolidated into one licensing agency. So just talking about medical and adult use, the Medical and Adult Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act ultimately is what has legalized and allowed cannabis to be sold and distributed in the state of California. It has created a single regulatory system for commercial cannabis activity within California. It requires all persons engaged in commercial cannabis activity to be licensed, and it allows local jurisdictions to control what activities are permitted in their jurisdiction, and we have a wide range of control. It also places the protection of the public as the highest priority. One thing to note, all the facilities that are licensed and are operating through this program are heavily regulated by the state. So that's the key takeaway from this particular slide. So what is commercial cannabis activity and who needs to be licensed? In a nutshell, all businesses conducting commercial cannabis activity, which includes businesses engaging in the cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, processing, storing, testing, packaging, labeling, transportation, delivery, or sale of cannabis, is required to be licensed by the state. And a separate license is required for each location where the business engages in commercial cannabis activities. This, however, does not include personal cultivation, which is done at a private residence, and that's authorized under a different section of the California Health and Safety Code. And effectively, under that section, for personal cultivation, someone must be over 21 years of age and may grow up to 6 cannabis plants for personal use. They cannot sell those products, though. And finally, all commercial cannabis activities may only be conducted between licensees. So what is the Department of Cannabis Control? It is a state agency that licenses and regulates cannabis businesses. It regulates the cultivation of cannabis plants, the manufacturing, the safety of cannabis plants, the transportation and tracking of cannabis goods throughout the state, events where cannabis is sold or used, the labeling, packaging of cannabis retail products, and finally, the testing of cannabis and cannabis products. And again, the point here to reiterate is that businesses, which are required to be licensed through the state, are heavily regulated, and it allows the state to ensure a level of quality control on the product and safety for the consumer. This slide just shows how many licenses are issued throughout the state. The annual, those are licenses that have been issued and are renewed on an annual basis. The provisional licenses, they're not yet fully approved by the state, but they are allowed to operate. And so you could see there are a good number of licenses throughout the state, including 464 retail licenses and a little over 1,000 provisional. On this map, it shows at each jurisdiction whether or not at least one form of commercial cannabis is licensed within that jurisdiction. And scrolling in a little bit more closely, looking at the LA County region, you could see for the red, the large swath of red represents LA County unincorporated, so the portions of the county that's covered by the Board of Supervisors. And because commercial cannabis activities are not yet permitted in the unincorporated territory, that's still red. But you could see the green areas represents jurisdictions within LA County that have at least one license for commercial cannabis. And off to the west is Ventura County. And you can see that within Ventura County unincorporated, there are licenses that have been issued within that jurisdiction. And then there are a few cities within Ventura County who do not yet have licenses. But taking a little bit closer look at LA County, for example, within LA County, there are 20 jurisdictions that permit or have at least one license approved for that area. And of note, that includes Culver City, LA City, Malibu, Pasadena, Santa Monica, and West Hollywood. all of those jurisdictions allow for some form of commercial cannabis. In Ventura County, that list includes Ojai, Oxnard, Port Hueneme, Thousand Oaks, and Ventura. And they could range from medical use to adult commercial cannabis or to cultivation, testing, manufacturing, et cetera. And this is just a quick look at a map provided by the Department of Cannabis Control showing existing licensed facilities around the Calabasas area. So right in the center of the map is Calabasas. You can see just right off to the east in LA City are a handful of facilities. The two that are down here to the south are located in Malibu. And there are two in Thousand Oaks that are not showing up on this map for some reason. Might be a filter that was on the map at the time, but there are two dispensaries in the city of Thousand Oaks that sell both medical and adult cannabis. So local approval of cannabis activity, as I had mentioned earlier, is required. The Department of Cannabis Control simply cannot issue a license if issuing that license will violate any local ordinance or regulation. This is followed by the State Business and Profession Code, which allows for jurisdictions to adopt and enforce ordinance to regulate commercial cannabis businesses, including but not limited to zoning, land use, license requirements, exposure to secondhand smoke, or completely prohibiting cannabis activities, all types within the jurisdiction. And then from a local standpoint, it was mentioned earlier that the city did adopt an ordinance, and that ordinance allows the council to impose up to a 10% tax on gross receipts for all cannabis related commercial business activity. That ordinance was followed by a resolution. So there is a resolution that has been passed by the city council that would require a 10% tax on cannabis activities. Section 8.13 of the municipal code deals with cultivation and use of marijuana. And then section 17.12.125 of the municipal code deals with marijuana from a land use standpoint. And as was mentioned earlier by the city manager, both of those sections prohibit all form of commercial cannabis activities within the city. However, they do allow for private cultivation for personal use, as was discussed earlier. So the factors to discuss and for the city council to consider, I'll go through each one of these, is to allow or not allow the type. If the city council were to allow, then there are other factors that the city council should consider. And I'll go through those right now. So again, the first main question is whether or not the city council wants to move forward with allowing or not allowing commercial cannabis activity. As I just stated, the city currently prohibits all commercial cannabis within the city of Calabasas. And so that's the first question. Within that, there's a sub question of, does the council want to allow medical use or adult use or both? And there's also all the other types of uses that we'll get into, or the types of activities. On this particular chart, what I do want to point out is it identifies by a percentage the number of people living within a city or an unincorporated area that has various levels of commercial cannabis activities. So on the far left, 2% of Californians live in a city or unincorporated area that has a licensed storefront, but no licensed delivery system. So that's a small number. We don't fall into that category. 33% live in an area that have a licensed storefront and licensed delivery. So for example, the city of Thousand Oaks or the city of Los Angeles, they permit both of those types of commercial cannabis activities. So that 33% of Californians live in that area. 54% live in an area where licensed delivery is allowed, but no licensed storefronts are permitted. And so that's where Calabasas falls. Our code does not explicitly prohibit deliveries, but we do explicitly prohibit commercial cannabis from a land use standpoint. And then finally, 11% of Californians live in an area where there are no licensed deliveries and there are no licensed commercial activities of any sort. The next question for the city council to consider if it were to allow commercial cannabis is what types of commercial cannabis. There's cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and transporting, testing, retail sales, and micro businesses. And I think most of those are relatively self-explanatory. However, micro businesses are specialized permits authorized by the state, and they allow a business to engage in 3 out of 4 of the major permit areas, which include cultivating, manufacturing, distributing, and retailing, but with some limitations. So for example, under a micro business permit, there's a limit of only 10,000 square feet for cultivation. So I won't go into all those details, but micro business allows one licensee to engage in multiple activities. The next question for consideration by the city council is if the city council were to allow commercial cannabis, and how many cannabis businesses does the city want to allow? So as I had mentioned earlier, under state law, the city can choose to limit the total number of allowed businesses within its jurisdiction. It can limit that by type. It could prohibit it altogether. So there's a wide range of options with regards to how much or how many commercial businesses the city would allow. This chart shows locally what other cities are doing. So the city of Malibu, for example, they allow 2 retail establishments, but they have no other forms of commercial cannabis. Deliveries are not in this chart specifically, but there's no cultivation, there's no manufacturing, for example. Thousand Oaks has 2 retail establishments, Ventura 5. Oxnard has 16 retail, 8 manufacturing, 1 testing lab, and 3 distributors. And then Port Hueneme has 12 retails and 6 delivery only, which is combined for 18, 5 cannabis lounges, 10 manufacturing, and 8 distributions. Cannabis lounges is not, it's a little bit separate. It's not quite within the licensing scheme that we talked about, but it's sort of a new form of land use that has cropped up over the past couple of years. The next factor for the city council to consider if it were to move forward is location and zoning, also operating standards. So the first question of what type of restrictions should the city apply to cannabis as a land use? And that would include location restrictions. So under the state law, commercial cannabis facility is required to be at least 600 feet from any school, daycare facility, or youth center at the time it's licensed. Another consideration for the city council would be a separation requirement. So the city could require commercial cannabis facilities to be separated at a certain distance. The point there would be to prevent concentration of a dispensary or a cultivation or manufacturing facility all within one particular area or too close to each other. And then the other option to the city council to consider would be operational requirements. This is a short list, but it's just to highlight. The city could require licensed security guards, designated hours of operation, installation of odor controls, and a prohibition of on-site consumption. In the previous slide, they talked about lounges. So as I mentioned, that's a new form of use that's come up over the years, but the city could prohibit on-site consumption as well. And then just taking a quick look at what that 600-foot radius from schools would look like. This map shows in the yellow, that's a 600-foot boundary from all schools and daycare facilities in and around the city. So as I mentioned, the state requires a minimum 600-foot distance from schools, daycare facilities, and youth centers. And that, again, is at the time of licensing. However, the city may impose a greater distance, and it may also add additional sensitive receptors, for example, a playground or a church facility. Moving on to the next factor of consideration, the type of permit. What type of permit would the city require if it were to move forward? there's sort of two main categories with regards to that. You have the land use entitlement side, and that controls the issuance of a land use permit that would run with the land and ultimately benefit the property owner. It's not specific to the business owner, it's specific to the land. The two common forms of land use entitlements include a conditional use permit, which again would run with the land. It's a discretionary permit and it's subject to review and decision by the Planning Commission. The other form of land use entitlement is a ministerial type of permit, and in this city that would be a zoning clearance. That is not a discretionary permit, and it is decided upon at a staff level. We have seen communities use one or the other, and some communities don't use the land use entitlement as a means of controlling cannabis. And again, it's a decision for the council. Then the next category is a regulatory permit. And again, the main difference here is that a regulatory permit would be specific to the business, and it would not necessarily run with the land. And for example, if that business left, then that business license or business registration would become null and void, and any new operator at that location or any other location would have to get a new business license. So it's more specific to the business, and it can also be tailored more towards business operations. Then you have, as another point of consideration, the permit processing procedures. And here the question is, how would the city process cannabis land use and or business license applications? There are several options. There's a first come, first serve option. There's a lottery system, and then there's a scoring system. A scoring system, if the city were to go down that route, the city would have to create some sort of objective scoring system, so that way it can review applications that came in and make a determination based off of an objective method. And finally, there are deliveries. The city currently allows deliveries from licensed facilities. However, and again, that's important, from licensed facilities. However, it could prohibit deliveries that begin or end within the city. Effectively, we already do prohibit them that begin in the city because we don't allow that as land use. However, under state law, the city cannot prevent delivery services from using the public roads to pass through the city. And state law does require delivery services to be fully licensed. And there's also new state law. I don't have the number in front of me, but there's new state law which is currently under dispute. And that state law prohibits cities from banning medical deliveries. One thing to note about deliveries, if the city were to go down the route of prohibiting deliveries in the city, that's a very, very difficult business to regulate or enforce. Which is why it's currently not prohibited, but it's not an easy one for the city to enforce because there are a lot of moving parts, and it's not coming from anyone that received a permit or a license in our boundaries. That we can easily control, but it's harder to enforce when it's coming from outside the city. So finally, taking a look at the fiscal impacts, if the city council were to move forward and direct staff to consider drafting an ordinance for commercial cannabis, we did reach out to our tax consultant HDL to get a sense of what the fiscal impact would be for the city. Based on the resolution that was adopted in 2021, which established a 10% tax on gross sale receipts for commercial cannabis activities, HDL, at least looking at a retail facility, estimated that each retail facility, if approved within the city, would likely generate anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million a year in tax revenue to the city. That's not their gross sales receipt. That's a direct tax revenue to the city based off of their gross sales. So that concludes my PowerPoint. Again, what we're here for is to seek direction from the city council to either do nothing, move forward with something, or come back with additional information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was a very thorough, very good and appreciated report, I'm sure by everyone. I will turn now to council comments, and I'm going to start with those who have worked on this and brought it forward, our task force. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub and then Councilmember Kraut.
Thank you. And thank you, Michael. This was a really good and thorough staff report. So much appreciated. Peter and I, this issue was brought to us as something to consider as part of the Economic Development Task Force. And it took a while for us to even get to the point if we wanted to discuss it. There was, right? Isn't that fair to say? Yeah. So, but we were both open-minded. It took me a little bit longer, but ultimately we were both open-minded and felt that it was definitely worthy to hear what's happening outside of the city. So we, worked with Michael and Kindon and Matt, had some calls with people in the industry, but most importantly, we went to tour some of the existing businesses. And then it got to a point that Peter and I felt we can't go any further without bringing this back to the council for discussion. And there's a lot involved in it. And I've definitely evolved in my thoughts on this subject from the time we started talking about it to now. And I want to hear from my colleagues, but just quickly, if we end up deciding that we want to go down this route, obviously we need to hear from the community on what they think, but there's so much we can regulate on this item, where it's located, hours of use. I don't think it was in here, but something about with security, mandating 24/7 security. There's so much control that we can have in this industry. I don't want to be short-sighted and later down the road, the state comes up with some crazy thing like they do many times and say that local cities who haven't allowed it, now you're not going to be able to collect the tax or something crazy. I just want to make sure that we're vetting this appropriately because we have a lot to lose if we end up passing on it and then we're required to do it at some point. So I definitely think that I want to obviously hear from our colleagues, hear from the public. I don't think we can make really many decisions I guess if we're interested in pursuing it, the next thing I would recommend is hearing from the public. But the one thing I want to stress is how much I learned about how much regulation can go into this. The most important, where it can be located in the city, hours of operation, limiting the number of stores. So there's a lot to think about. Nothing obviously being decided tonight, but Peter and I really just wanted to hear from our colleagues on this. But we did a lot of listening, and I think it was a good exercise to get it to this point. But Michael and Kindon and Matt gave us a lot of education on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kraut. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for joining me in this exercise. It's been certainly eye-opening to say the least. And thank you, Michael, for your presentation. I do want to share with our fellow council members some of the thoughts that we discussed along the way. First of all, the places that we visited in Malibu, one on the outside and even on the inside was reminiscent of a liquor store. It was very plain in front with, small windows. You really couldn't look in, and there wasn't much to say about it. The other one was more like a lounge. It had a lobby in front with a security guard, and the store was a room set inside a room with limited access. And, although the signage was there at the street, there was a means there that stopped people from congregating outside because they had a place to congregate inside. I liked that feature. I liked the security that we saw at the second place. And why am I talking about that? And why are we talking about this tonight? Well, the state of California has determined that this is legal. And we've seen a number of cities adopted ordinances that allow it. And we're right in that fringe territory right now where it's not universally adopted.
And so if we want to take a step forward and have any means of control to be able to set boundaries requiring the lobby where people will congregate, requiring the security, selecting only a couple of locations in the city of Calabasas, putting it out on a qualification-based, I'm forgetting the language in there, but not a lottery, where we would actually allow people to submit their proposals and be able to select the two best proposals for the city of Calabasas to be able to get the tax dollars now before this becomes prolific elsewhere, to get an established business here with a tax base before it becomes a state mandated requirement and the tax base is all gone. And so I see this as an opportunity for the city to get in now, as Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub mentioned, to a system that may force us in this direction in the next 5 years. And once we're forced in this direction, we're going to lose control. So I think it's a time to definitely look deeper into it and bring back some options for us. And I would encourage my fellow council members just to be open-minded in the process. And let's see how it can benefit the city and be controlled by the city at the same time.
Thank you very much. So task force, I'm going to turn to other council comments at this point. I'll turn to Councilmember Bizagian.
Well, I'm very disappointed to see this here based on the prior history of this in front of the city. First of all, Matt, if I'm not mistaken, the state legalization was done through a proposition. So I'm not sure that the legislature can just change that at will.
The Proposition 64 was passed by the voters in 2016. It included ability for the legislature to make modifications to the program subject to certain limits. So the state's opinion, and it's been validated in a couple of court cases, the legislature's modifications of the program since 2016 were within the confines of what Prop 64 voter approval allowed the legislature to do.
Okay, but they haven't, none of the bills have been tested because I believe they didn't pass regarding forcing dispensaries per square mile.
Those bills have all failed. I believe none of them passed the legislature so far.
So we really don't know. My read of it is that kind of thing would have to go back to the voters because that was clearly spelled out in that local control would trump any of the state provisions in the proposition. But in any event, I don't see this as something that the city could not amend if it ever became an emergency where we had to do something after the state acted, because it wouldn't go into effect right away in any event. Prior to the state law going into effect, cities were given choices as to how to proceed. And Matt, my recollection is this council voted 5-0 to do two things. One, to prohibit dispensaries in the city of Calabasas, and two, to have a very generous delivery ordinance, which did not regulate deliveries at all, unlike some other local cities that do. In other words, we allow deliveries within the city, and we don't regulate deliveries. Correct?
The city's only cannabis ordinances prohibit cannabis as a land use except for the required personal use cultivation indoors of up to 6 plants. Our ordinance does not regulate deliveries nor prohibit them, as I recall. We do have the tax in place.
Well, that's my next point. On the taxing, we were supposed to get, all these tax estimates of $500,000 plus. So we were supposed to get tax money from these deliveries because that was written into Measure C. How much have we collected on those taxes in the last 2 years?
Mayor, can I answer? Intervene at the same.
Yes, please. Of course.
So, Councilmember, the city hasn't collected any funds on deliveries at this point. I talked with about that with Matt earlier. And Matt, would you like to talk about why that hasn't been put in place?
Happy to explain. So far, the city has collected nothing on the deliveries into the city. It was a decision regarding enforcement and resource prioritization. It is not easy to collect a tax on deliveries into the city when the deliveries happen as one-off deliveries with no records and no proof. The only way we can enforce that is to seek records via subpoena or litigation against the dispensaries and surrounding communities that delivered into the city, then seek to assert information regarding what portion of those deliveries were into Calabasas, and then impose the 10% tax thereon. And the decision so far has been not to pursue that resource investment, given the likelihood of not returning a net positive.
Well, that was an internal staff decision because that was not the council's that never came here for a formal discussion or decision.
There was never a request to have a formal discussion of that at the council level. We could certainly have that if there were support for the council to do so. There had not been in the past.
My point is that a lot of this tax estimate is self-reporting and that's the maximum we would ever possibly get if everything were reported properly. And considering we got 0 on the tax delivery, I'm not confident we would get anywhere near $500,000 on any taxes. In any event, I have another issue with this, which is that we have 20 of 88 cities in LA County that have dispensaries, and looking at the 20 that do, they're nothing like Calabasas. They have large commercial, industrial areas where these facilities can be put, which we don't have. Any place you put it in Calabasas is going to be near a residential community. That's just the way our city's laid out. There's absolutely no place to put it where it would not be near somebody. And of course, the council can zone certain areas and say, okay, well, we'll have this over here, but that means somebody is going to have it in their neighborhood a block away from where they live, regardless of where you put it. It's not appropriate. I don't know of any city of our size and our demographics in terms of its land use issues that has dispensaries. None in LA County. Another issue. We have moved ahead of the curve in, even though they're legal products, and I don't think anybody here said that we should, try to ban the actual use. But we have regulated and limited tobacco. There's been talk about not allowing tobacco sales. We have outlawed vaping. We required our retailers to liquidate their vaping supplies. So it seems entirely inconsistent to then open up dispensaries and keep that as illegal activity. If this comes back, I'd like those ordinances to come back too, because I think it's grossly unfair to and inconsistent to do that. And I think that legal argument could be made that it's inconsistent. I'm also disappointed with Measure C, because when this was brought, Measure C was brought by a then Councilmember Shapiro and then Councilmember Gaines. We had a long discussion about it because a couple of us had some serious concerns that this would open the floodgates. But we were told at the time, and we all agreed, that this was in order to stop state preemption. And if the state were to ever impose it, we would have an automatic tax that went through. So that was kind of said that was definitely said at the time. And it was said in the ballot statement and the arguments. And now 2 years later, we're talking about exactly what my trepidation of Measure C was. I mean, I supported putting Measure C on the ballot because I listened to the arguments and they were made, but I did not mean that to be a backdoor method for just bringing it here and passing it. And if that was the case, it should have been said back then and not simply brought 2 years later to us. The point I'm making is I don't think, given the availability of cannabis dispensaries in the local area, in particular in Woodland Hills, less than a mile away from our city, that we need to have those dispensaries here to serve our community. I think there are some things we forewent tax money involving tobacco and vaping products, and we did so because of our general concern about those items while understanding their legality. And I think that we need to do that with cannabis dispensaries too. I just have very significant concerns that would not allow me to vote in favor of putting them here, even if I'm in the minority. So I will not be voting to move forward. I don't know why this keeps coming back, with new proposals. The state, to be afraid of the state preempting, the state can do whatever it wants. The state tomorrow could pass an emergency bill that says that everything's preempted, if what you're saying is true, Michael. and that they can just impose their will. So I'm not sure that we're going to lose out any opportunities to react to any state legislation anyways. So the long and the short of it is I'm not supportive of this and I would not move forward with it. I mean, I've thought about it. I've thought of, for example, on the medical marijuana, I mean, I'd be a little more open to something like that, opening a medical marijuana dispensary. But I'm not sure that, I mean, other than the tax revenue, which would be a benefit if we collected it, I'm not sure that there's, I mean, again, Woodland Hills has those things, so I'm not sure our residents are underserved. But at least with that, I would be open to regulating that. And that would be the limit of my openness.
Thank you, Councilmember Bazagian. Councilmember Albrecht.
Thank you, Mayor. Very controversial subject. I don't care who you talk to. We've lived with this, with cannabis, basically our whole adult life, wherever you've lived. And James, you make a very good argument. And I understand the argument on the other side. I want to thank Michael. He did a terrific job of illustrating exactly what we need to do. Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub and Mayor Councilmember Kraut, a lot of work went into that. And I know a lot of thought went into it. This tonight was supposed to be a discussion, and that's what we have on the very first page of the pamphlet. A cannabis discussion. So I don't know we're going to be making a vote tonight. I think it's preemptive to make a vote. I think the discussion needs to go a little bit further. I'm not ready to say yes or no, but I can certainly see the argument for a city like ours that we're so careful about whatever goes here. We're a small city and it's a microscope. So where would a cannabis store go? And I thought about this a lot. If I was going to be a potential owner, where would I put one? Where would the city want to see it? How do the residents feel about it? There's a lot of conversation about this. And also the potential on the other side of the coin for what that revenue would do. So I look at both sides. So let's just talk about what the revenue would do. First of all, we're not prohibiting people or giving them a license to buy in our city, because they don't need that. They could buy it again in Woodland Hills. Again, yeah, only a mile away. I pass it almost every single day. But we're giving that revenue up. They're going to purchase it anyway. So that revenue can provide a significant amount of success for, if you put it toward a goal. Pick a goal. So I picked one, and I picked the parks. I said, we put this money toward parks. Doesn't go to the general fund. It stays earmarked for that purpose. We can come up with some other purposes. I see a great benefit in that we'll have a revenue stream that will really enhance our city in a lot of ways. And on the other side of the coin, this could be even a 50-50 toss, how people feel about it. But it's a commonplace right now. And I think if we're discreet about it, and the process of even selecting the vendor and the criteria of the complicated, it's not that complicated, but putting together all the criteria to the selection process and how that selection process would be, I think it's worth, again, discussion. And that's what we're doing tonight. So I would be in favor of discussing it. I'm inclined to support it, given the right opportunity, the right location. I don't think we're at this point, with the history of what cannabis has in the state, we're labeling ourselves in any way. It's not something that we have to hide from and run away from. So I'd like to continue this discussion a little bit further. I'm not sure exactly how we'll do that, Mayor, but I only heard about this about a week ago. So it's not fair to the citizens. It's not fair to the city for me to make a decision. I think it's way too early to take a vote on it.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for their comments. Just a couple quick questions. And I'll start by saying, yes, I was very happy to have co-brought this forward for purposes of locking in a tax back when the council voted to do so. And that purpose was, as James had mentioned, to at that point, Matt, to preempt the ability to lose that 10% tax revenue if it was ever mandated or the council chose otherwise, but it was never an intent to be a place setting to move forward in my mind. So I'm going to ask you, obviously, I think I know the answer, 2 questions legally. One, is the 10% tax that we have locked in place, or is that something that can be preempted? And then could you briefly discuss any state versus federal issues that have come up recently?
So under existing law, the voter-approved 10% tax or up to 10% tax is locked in place, barring a complete sea change in state law. The tax is in place. State versus federal, as we all know, federal law presently prohibits cannabis possession, use, etc. The federal government has not enforced that law except against folks who are not in compliance with state law for a number of years under a provision in the federal budget that is renewed every year. There's a new federal budget. They renew the budget clause that prohibits the federal government from using law enforcement resources on enforcing against folks who are in compliance with state law. So we're operating in somewhat of a gray area, but it has been baked in for the last, since the late 90s, that's been in place, and it survived administrations of all stripes in federal government politics so far. Does it survive every year? It's always an open question, but it seems to be a fairly reliable, but no guarantees component of the federal framework we are in. Federal law does enforce regularly against folks who are out of compliance with state law. So the groups that will violate both face that risk. And on the preemption component, the state certainly could try to preempt local control, as has been tabled a number of times in the legislature. So far, each time, including the one that was pending when Measure C was on the table, ultimately that failed. And it has failed every other time, but it could pass legislature. If it did, lawsuits would follow. I would expect instantly. It will be up to the Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court recently has not been terribly fond of local control in other contexts. So I think there is a serious risk there, although the provisions of Prop 64 are clear that voter control is to be maintained through Business and Professions Code 26200, which guarantees local zoning control.
Okay, just as a follow-up, and thank you for all that. So even if we went forward, had discussions, did public input and approved something, that tax rate that we're talking about could be removed in 2 to 3, 4 years anyway, correct?
Well, the council could lower the tax at will.
No. I meant by the state, based on what you just said, with the state Supreme Court.
Oh, no, I don't see a risk of the tax being undone.
Okay.
The risk I see is of the zoning control being undone.
Okay. Understood.
There's some risk of that. I think the tax would be fine.
Okay. Thank you. And I do want to say I'm going to repeat some of the things because I do agree with, and I appreciate the task force and Michael, your report, and Kendon, your work on this. I agree with a lot of things James has mentioned. I want to bring them up. Our city as a whole has been one of the first and active when it comes to not smoking, no secondhand smoke, no e-cigarettes, no hookah, no vaping, no vaping sales, rather, no cannabis sales. And we have been a city that has been steadfast as a whole. Now, I realize things change and we do have to look at finances as well. If this is only about finances, then there's maybe some more issues we need to discuss. But the biggest input to me comes at this point from the public. We need to hear from the public as a whole, not just one vocal group or another. We need to hear from our whole city, however we could do that, in my mind, before taking any steps. We don't have to legally, but it's the right thing to do in this city, in any city. And again, the dollars, I am well aware of what the revenue can be. Those $500 to $1 million revenue sources equal one hotel TOT per year. So that's a large amount of money. And 5 or 6 years ago, I've been approached in this city by many people involved in this business, and they're outside the city and they're paying at least the middle of that amount, if not more, per year to LA and LA County, and have been for some time. And we have not allowed it. And I'm not saying one way or the other that we should or should not allow it, but I do understand the discussion here and the consideration. It also, in addition to going to the public, or at least hearing from a public and getting some input, should be reviewed by, I believe, our commission, probably the Public Safety Commission, if it got that far, if that's what this council wants. And I took notes because this was such a very, very detailed report. And I have all kinds of notes, Michael, on what you provided. I don't know that I need to get into them now, except summarize to say the issue of medical/adult or both is obviously one issue if we go there. The second is the delivery, the others types of businesses, the amount. And I guess my question, it isn't in here, but what are the other, and this is for another day, but what are the other local cities like Malibu and TO do when it comes to either an objective scoring system or one of the other two? I'll ask you now.
Malibu has had, or Thousand Oaks has had theirs in place for a while, so I don't know what they did. Malibu was put in through proposition, so I'm not sure what their process was. But we do have Ojai, which our city attorney is representative of Ojai, and I am under the understanding that Ojai has an objective process, not a lottery system.
Okay, and Malibu,
I can speak to that real briefly. So I am, among other hats, Ojai City Attorney. They had a limit of 3 dispensaries. They started medical right after Prop 64 passed, and they later expanded to adult use over the years. And they had a hard number application process and then a set of criteria, and it was done in-house.
We could easily research what each city requires. That's not difficult. I just don't have the information for Malibu or Thousand Oaks right now.
Okay. I figured maybe the committee knows. No idea. No. Okay. All right. That's, again, I have a lot of questions. And if we were to go there, my thoughts, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, are a much larger than 600 feet. Schools, religious institution, parks, city properties, a lot of things. And all the listed items go off in my mind as things. It would be, as James mentioned, very difficult to find a location in this city, but maybe not impossible. And certainly anything's possible. The conditions of the business license and either requirement or none versus conditional use would be discussions. Again, all those things came to mind. I note also in your report, our neighboring cities of Agoura, Westlake, Hidden Hills was not on there, but they do not have dispensaries, correct?
That is correct. They do not have any licensed commercial cannabis.
Right. And I realize delivery goes forward in this city and all over, and that's not something we're going to be able. I do remember the discussion about trying to get those taxes, and we were hoping to, but it's very difficult. And if it's not in a marked car, if it's not someone who's registered with the city, I understand those problems. So if it's certainly the tax revenue is a big item, and that I think is driving this, along with possibly how things have changed, and not just the state, but possibly in our city and others as well. But while I'm not pushing to support, I am also willing to hear more or learn more at this time. But I do want to hear more from my colleagues and the public, and we do have some public speaker cards, unless any of my colleagues want to go first.
Can I say something?
Mayor Pro Tem, yes.
And everything James said, that was me on our first call. I hardly even wanted to discuss this item. I was so opposed, but the more, like, Peter and I have an advantage because we've spent time listening and hearing and visiting stores, but everything you said is like where we started this conversation. So I think at this point, right, like the 600 feet, whatever it is, like we were pushing for everything to be as restrictive as possible on certain things. But before we even had that conversation, it was A, to hear what the council thought, and then B, to hear what the community thought. This might not be something of interest to the community. We might continue to learn more, but this was really to hear from everyone up here tonight, because Peter and I, this was brought to us as something to consider, and we got to a point where we needed to hear from the rest of you. It wasn't meant to really go into the fine details at all.
Anyone else? Councilmember Crowe.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to just comment in response to a few things that were brought up. And first of all, I've got to say for the record, okay, aside from the 2 stores that we visited with the 5 of us here, which we did not purchase anything to go or partake in the store, I haven't even been in the same room with cannabis in over 30 years, okay? So this for me is not a question of lifestyle or the image of the city or something. I certainly would agree that as we move forward, if we decide to move forward, that we explore opportunities of how to keep this discreet in Calabasas. The issues that were brought up as far as delivery and taxes, I do want to point out that although it's impossible for us, or almost impossible for us, to collect taxes on stuff that's delivered to our city, the delivery systems we've learned are like DoorDash, in that you order and the delivery person goes to the nearest store or the one that you designate, picks up the cannabis and delivers to your home. And so the origin of where that cannabis is sold is most likely nearest where the person ordering it is from, unless they wanted to order from Beverly Hills and have it delivered to Calabasas. Most likely it would be ordered from the nearest store. So the tax base that we've talked about here would include store purchases as well as likely deliveries in and around the area. And it would be a tax that we could see and regulate, because that would be part of our agreement with any retail stores that we might allow here. So the taxes would be a lot more secure under a retail store here in Calabasas. The second thing that was questioned was the scoring system that we had mentioned. Tonight's probably not the night to go into details on that, but you know, we discussed all sorts of things that could be used in those scoring systems that would really increase the quality of stores that might end up here in Calabasas. And then lastly, I just want to remind council members and for Councilmember Albrecht's comment there, that we're not voting on allowing this tonight. We're not voting on approving anything tonight. What we're voting on is allowing the staff to continue to explore this further and bring back more information. So if we decide as a council that we don't want them to, and we want to kill that tonight, that can be done. But if we decide yes tonight, we're not saying yes to cannabis in the city. We're saying yes to staff exploring it further and bringing us more information.
Thank you. Councilmember Albrecht, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you. Councilman Crowd, thank you for that. Because there really wasn't an intention on the agenda. It's just said discussion. And to continue the discussion would be a good thing to vote. And I would certainly be in favor of continuing that discussion and moving it forward. I also have a couple of questions, one in particular for Michael. And that is, again, this review you did was just terrific, because there's a lot of elements in here that will be discussed. So in business, everybody needs to be competitive, whatever product you're selling. 10% on a tax could be competitive. It could be way overpriced. I'm not sure where that ranks, but to go through all this motion and be overpriced in the marketplace, if this is where we're considering, do other cities, do you have an idea where they stand?
The lowest I've heard is 5%, but the average that I've heard is closer to 10%. So most cities are around the 10%, and all retailers would be taxed based on the jurisdiction they're in. So I do believe like Port Hueneme, for example, they have 12 or 14 facilities, and Port Hueneme is also much smaller than the city of Calabasas, both in land size and in population. And they have 12 or 14 retail dispensaries. I think they only have a 5% tax.
I think our closest competitor would be, I'd be interested to know what that tax is. And that competitor is right there on Topanga and Ventura. The other thought I have is the few dispensaries that I've seen over the years, I've only been from the outside, but I know that they do have parking. People generally come in and out very quick, or they try to. I don't know of only a few in the city that would be eligible for it. So that would be something that if we move forward on this to discuss, to consider those type of locations where the property would be very discreet, but also have the support traffic so there wouldn't be traffic problems.
That is correct. Accessibility would be something to look at. I think has been mentioned tonight by Mr. Summers and the city manager. The city has a lot of flexibility right now if it were to move forward with licensing or permitting commercial cannabis. We could establish a lot of parameters, and those parameters could either come in the form of the land use entitlement process or in the form of the business license process. The business license process would allow us to review those parameters annually as well. So that's the reason why we're looking at this tonight, is to get direction and keeping in mind that we have a lot of flexibility at the moment to regulate these. A comment was made about tobacco retailers, for example. The only thing that we regulate when it comes to tobacco retailers is we require them to be registered with the city, and there's no cost to do that. And we don't allow them to sell vaping products. As it stands right now, that would transfer over to a cannabis retail dispensary. If something like that were permitted, they would not be able to sell a vaping product. They could sell the other products, but not the vaping, unless we looked at that and amended that portion of the ordinance. But what we're talking about tonight would regulate cannabis commercial a lot more and more heavily than the tobacco retailers are regulated. Tobacco retailers don't have an extra tax by the city. They're not required to meet very specific parameters, i.e. having a security guard on site. We don't allow the indoor smoking or outdoor smoking. But that again would likely transfer over to any cannabis activity.
And if I could jump in with one final point there, the heart of it is we have a number of options. If the discussion regarding cannabis continues, we have greater flexibility than almost any other land use in terms of how we regulate it, if the choice is made to continue the conversation and ultimately to make a decision regarding regulatory options. So there's a fair amount of flexibility baked in.
Thank you. Anything further, Councilmember Albright? Okay.
Well, I feel like, Michael, I feel like your comments were trying to rebut my comments, and I don't think staff should take sides on this. I also think that your comment about vaping is not accurate. We banned vaping products, correct?
That's what I said on that one. So we did ban.
So it's not that tobacco retailers can't sell vaping products. No one can sell vaping products.
Correct. That's correct. We have banned all vaping sales.
Clear that if we approve this, we will have an incongruent system of what we allow and what we don't allow.
That is not correct. This council could structure the cannabis ordinance, if adopted, to prohibit the sale of cannabis vaping products, but still allow the sale of cannabis of other cannabis products, including edible products, what they call the flower, the actual plant material, or the other tinctures and creams and things. There's a number of options there. So they could be married together to match, or the vaping ordinance could be adjusted to allow the sale of cannabis vaping products. It would be a future policy choice that has not yet been made.
Okay, but vaping products themselves are not legally available here, correct?
That is correct under current law. Yes.
Okay, so there is going to be, if we allow cannabis products, that would be, we would still not, that would not open the door to anything else. And one of my comment was not directed toward whether this or that should be allowed. It's that it is an incongruent system if we just simply enacted a cannabis dispensary ordinance.
if the cannabis dispensary ordinance was
It has nothing to
enacted,
do with vaping.
the two of them would allow non-vaping cannabis products to be sold.
Correct.
Unless the council otherwise amended it. There are choices, of course. But it can be done so that they're the two harmonized. You sell everything that isn't vaping, the rest of the cannabis product line, so to speak.
I understand.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Seeing no one else, we do have someone who's been very patiently waiting to speak in public comment. I know we'd all like to hear. Timothy, and please tell us your name and where you reside, please. Thank you.
Thanks so much. My name is Tim Dodd. I'm a Calabasas resident. I've lived here for about a decade. I'm also the owner of a number of cannabis operations in the city of Los Angeles and Culver City and Pasadena, in Chico, and we have another store coming up in Fresno. So we've been very lucky and fortunate to be successful in a number of these merit-based processes. Sweet Flower is the name of my company, but I really am here wearing two hats. I sent you all an email earlier yesterday. My interest in this is to preserve the integrity of the city that I love and that has been very welcoming to me and my family, and also to preserve the integrity of the city staff and council. I would also like to commend the city staff on the excellent presentation. This presentation is one that you normally see about 6 to 12 months into the process, not the first presentation. I think this is great. It's very well done and very comprehensive. Sweet Flower, to give you an idea of tax revenue. So we've paid about $27 million in state and local taxes. I just did some quick math in the last 5 years since we began operations in January 1 of 2018. This year alone, we will probably pay about $700,000 in additional community benefits to the communities that we serve in the state of California. We support 24 or so community benefits charities in our cities. We focus on 3 types of groups. We focus on food insecurity, underhousing, and racial injustice. I have a team of about 200 people. We're about 85% diverse and about 90% diverse at the store level. I think this is really about, and there's a lot to unpack here, and I get it that this is stigmatized. I'm not a cannabis advocate. I'm an advocate for good business and good jobs. So from my point of view, this is really about money, and it's about providing people with an opportunity. From the point of view of Calabasas, I understand that this actually is complicated. So with my advocacy hat on as a business person, you have a lot more opportunity to control what happens in the city if you actually adopt a program. Right now, there are about 110 delivery services on a program called Weed Maps that delivers cannabis into Calabasas every day. By state law, those cars that come in are unmarked. You can't do anything about them. You can't find them. You can't enforce against them. So you're losing a lot of tax revenue. You will be preempted. State Bill 1186 is already enforced. That actually allows anyone to set up a medical dispensary, a medical delivery within the city of Calabasas right now. So that is coming. And then lastly, 10% sales tax from our point of view is a lot, but it's actually completely congruent with LA. So next door, Woodland Hills is paying 10%. It is a lot of money. People do complain about it, but they accept that this is part of getting a legal, tested, safe product. So I've only got a couple of minutes. I will just close a couple of seconds. I'll close very quickly. I think this is something that the city should at least consider further. I do think the city has done a lot of work here. That's good. And I'd like to thank you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And we all did receive your letter, as far as I'm aware. Are there any other public comments present, or Madam Clerk, are there any online comments?
No, Mr. Mayor, no more comments.
Okay. Then I will go
I
ahead.
take that back. Joe Shilko
Okay.
and Norma Citron.
Okay. In order, we'll start with Joe Chilco.
Hi, this is Joe Chilco. I'm a longtime resident. I think it's worthy of further discussion, and I definitely think that you have to take it out to the public. So regardless of where this is going, it's got to be something that most people would not have caught this item on the agenda, and that's probably why you don't have a lot of people at the moment commenting. But to reiterate what the last speaker said, these people are all businessmen. So they're in the business to succeed, and there's an opportunity for tax revenue. And yes, I have some ideas of where I'd like to see it go that are more along the lines of fire prevention. But in any event, I support you having further discussion. To me, it becomes a matter of how much time and effort is required to take this beyond discussion and whether you want to invest that. But I fully support you talking. It's a good idea. Talk to the public too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Norma Citron.
Hi there, this is Mark Citron. I'd just like to say how disappointed I really am that the council is even considering this issue. I think that a lot of people on the dais see a lot of dollar signs and what they're willing to do for those dollar signs. Maybe we could look next month and see if legalized gambling could could make the city a lot of money. I'd like to know how much money was spent just on the survey that was done for tonight in the presentation and how much staff time was involved in it. I see a lot of talk on the council about how much revenue is to be gained. I'm looking for where the discussion is ever as to how the city can save money. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else online?
No, Mr. Mayor, no more comments.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll turn to my colleagues for any additional comments or discussion. Okay, if I heard correctly, and I guess it's my pleasure or privilege to be able to sum up the discussion, even if I was inclined, let's say, to not support further discussion, it seems to me there is clearly a majority of council that wants to have this further discussed and look into this more at this time. Did I get that correct with the numbers?
I think there's interest to hear what the public has to say.
Okay, that's further information and discussion. And go ahead, Councilmember Kraft.
I was just going to say, I think we've heard that, we want better participation from the public at the next hearing, I think. So I think it needs to be advertised, not just posted in our agenda so that we have more than two voices online and one here in the chambers.
But the beauty is even hearing from those two residents who called in, the differing of opinion. And that's why we're want to hear from the community.
Did you want to add something, Councilmember?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I think the discussion is warranted. It's an important topic, and we can put this to bed once and for all for a while. I'm sure maybe it'll come up again one way or another in 5 years or so or more. But once we have vendors here, if that's the way it's going, it'll be more on a permanent basis. If not, then we won't have to worry about it again. But it's certainly a worthy conversation, and we've already invested enough time. And we should invest a little bit more time so we get all the answers that people have to make an informed decision.
Okay, and Councilmember Bezos.
I heard 4 council members who wanted to discuss it further. I would not be interested in that, but as long as 4 are, obviously it should be discussed. I'd like hopefully a more neutral staff presentation next time.
Okay, and my comment or question, Kendon, I guess for you and maybe all of us is there some type of, rather than having an open item, long discussion with the public or some type of forum, is there any type of survey that would not be very expensive, as was mentioned by one of our residents, that could get information from our residents as to their views? So we could do that initially. That's just a thought. I don't know what you all think.
Mayor, thank you for that question. And that was one of the ideas that I wanted to come back and discuss with staff. What we do hear from council at this point is better participation from the public, which could be, as you mentioned, a forum or a town hall or some type of venue where the community is actually able to come in person and voice their opinion on this matter. Second, we'd like to explore a survey or a mechanism to reach a broader audience as well, but also look at costs of those. And also the reach and extent of something like that.
Okay, thank you. Any council thoughts on that?
My only thought on the survey, it's not a bad idea. It's just that we've had some bad experiences recently with surveys.
We wouldn't do it
where we
in-house.
don't get, no, it's not the in-house part. It's actually like one time the 91301 zip code was left off. Another time the demographic when we got it back was skewed heavily toward one age group. And another time it was skewed heavily toward one region of the city. It's very hard to do that. So I'm not, unless it's going to be hiring someone to do an actual poll or survey, I'm not sure I want it just informally where people can log on who don't even live in the city and start commenting.
I agree.
And I'll just follow up with that if I can. I agree with that. This is an important enough item, regardless, where we want to get the most public input we can, as opposed to just having those who can make it here, come to a Zoom meeting, or come even to a town hall. So the more input, the better, from my point of view.
And sorry, I think there was one important component just for everyone to know. On one of our task force meetings, we had a representative from the Lost Hill Sheriff Station join our call because we wanted to know, like, the number one question I had, and that we wanted to discuss was how safe was having a business like this in our community. So I think that would be a really important voice for the public to hear, because that was something that I thought was a really important discussion with what they shared and suggestions. And so I'd like to make sure that we have that representative.
Okay, anything further? Okay. You have council direction at this point? Anything you want to add?
I do. So, Mayor, there were also a couple other things that came up, but I don't know if there's consensus on that. Let me just look at the notes real quickly.
And if I could jump in there very briefly as well, it would be helpful for staff if there's support from the council to have perhaps Economic Development Task Force as two to work with to help sort out how to put together some of these next steps, such as designing a survey and things like that, if survey is used or similar.
Do you feel you need, I guess I'm looking at our city manager. Do you feel you need that?
I think that would be wonderful to continue to have the task force work on this with their input based on the direction from the council.
I'm okay with that. Anyone else? Matt?
Sure, it would be if there's support from the council, or at least majority thereof, to allow staff to continue to work with the Economic Development Task Force as we identify how best to secure public engagement and additional information. It's helpful to have two to work with on that front.
Councilmember Albrecht,
I support that.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Kraut?
Yes, I support that.
And Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub? Okay, and Councilmember Bazagian?
Well,
No, I'm not putting you on the spot.
I don't support going forward, but if it goes forward, I have no problem with the task force moving forward.
Thank you. And I agree. There were a couple other items. Is that it?
I was just looking at notes.
Mr. City Manager.
Did the council want any more information on the taxes, the potential taxes? I know there was different comments about that, but is there any specific direction from the majority of the council on what we would return a report on in regard to
I don't
taxes?
understand the question.
I just noticed that there were different questions about the taxes, the 10% less of a rate. What kind of research do we want to bring back to the council?
It's an ordinance.
I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't support changing the percentage.
Yeah.
We have to get to the point of if it's
I think
going to
we're
be
so
supported
far.
by council and the community first. If you bring back numbers, I bring them back at 10%. That's the only comment I'd make.
Well, but that's our ordinance. So
Right.
that's already there.
Right.
You know, what I was saying, I think Councilman Albrecht asked about comparative cities and what their taxes are and things like that. Is that relevant to the majority of the council at this
Not
point?
for me.
Okay.
No, thank you. Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so we have direction from council and noted comments on all sides. Good discussion overall, and thank you for all the effort and work put in so far. All right, now we'll move on to informational reports. Check register for the period December 22nd, December 30th, 2022 to January 13th, 2023. Are there any questions regarding the check register?
I had one
Councilmember
quick
Bazan?
question on the landscape maintenance districts where we've gotten some complaints about the timeliness of the, I don't know if it involves a check register or not. Is that involved in this? Is that why there's late reporting of?
No,
budget?
that's not part of the check
It's
register.
not related
Yeah.
to that?
No,
Okay,
it isn't.
all right. No other questions.
Okay, any questions? Any other council members? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to task force reports. Task force reports over here. Councilmember Kraut.
Yeah, just want to report that I did participate in the League of Cal Cities Transportation, Communication and Public Works Policy Committee on the I forget what day it was, January 12th. And there's another meeting of that coming up on Friday. We'll be discussing bills in the legislature that affect transportation, public works and communication, as well as anything that addresses water infrastructure.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Albrecht?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting involved in some of these.
Michael.
I'm looking forward to being involved in the committees that I've been asked to participate in. One is certainly coming up, which is very exciting for me, the League of California Cities, the new mayors and new council members. Councilmember Kraut and I are going to be at this next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I think that'll really help me an awful lot to have a better foundation for administration on a lot of levels. Also, Headwaters Corner. I'm going to be involved in that next week. So I think I'll have a lot more to report as we move forward, as I get my feet wet.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Bazan.
Yes, I know it's been touched on before, but again, January 28th, the chamber is having its annual installation banquet. Our mayor will be administering the, I don't think this was mentioned before, the oath of office to the new board members. And we will be giving the Spirit of Calabasas, or the chamber will be giving the Spirit of Calabasas awards. So that's that task force I'm on. The other one, I also mentioned at the beginning on January 30th at 6 p.m. There's a Zoom virtual meeting regarding the community center's future and the roof repairs. I did have a quick question for Matt that's pertinent to the council. It's okay, I assume, that all of us or more than two can go, correct?
Yes, because it's a separate Brown Act body. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, no, it's not a separate Brown Act body because the city's running it, because the city's going to be running the programming. They're taking input as to what people want there. So
isn't that still a meeting of the JPA Center Board?
It's
just a city meeting.
It's city
with the two task force, but it's still open to the public. So the additional members of the council can attend any task force meeting as long as they don't participate in the discussion.
Okay.
So anyone else other than the task force members can attend, but just not as a council member.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub.
We had our COG meeting, and I'm going to bring one thing up on future agenda items, but we spoke about priorities for this year, and Councilmember Bazagian educated us about some changes that might be able to take place with a new sheriff's contract. So the COG is going to be looking at that to see how we can increase our contracts to get more service. So that's something that was unanimously voted on by the COG that we're going to be working on this year.
Anything further?
No, I have something for future agenda items.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I'll go quickly. I attended along with Councilmember Albrecht and our former mayor, founding mayor, Dennis Washburn, the Valley Economic Alliance, our region, our future event at Cal State Northridge, which featured interview and discussion with Mayor Karen Bass and our new supervisor for our city, Lindsay Horvath. And Michael Klein represented the city exceptionally well and was handling questions and passing out cards and giving information to lots of different individuals and businesses, both in and hoping to do business in our city. So that was a very well-attended event and a good event. I also have attended all the SCAG meetings. I'm on numerous committees there. The biggest take back I have is the legislative committee meeting where we had Director Stephen Shaw for the governor's director of finance for the state provide us with a detailed description and going through questions and so forth on the state budget, going from what was a positive look to a $22.5 billion shortfall on the budget this coming year, talking about areas where there will be less funding and so forth. Also attended the League of Cities, my first Community Services Policy Committee on the 12th, and the 27th is our next meeting as well. And has already, as you've already mentioned, and everyone is welcome, but I know only Alicia and I are able to speak. The February 2nd meeting of the Emergency Preparedness Public Safety Task Force with the homeowners, presidents, and others from the Public Safety Commission will be taking place and will be shown by our own CTV and recorded for future showing. And that's all I have. And
Where is this February 2nd?
it's a Founders Hall, and it's also going to be on Zoom.
6 p.m.?
No, 6 p.m. Yes,
Not on Zoom.
Founders Hall.
So
Not on Zoom?
Mayor,
Not on Zoom.
it's being recorded, but it won't be on Zoom or CTV.
It will be on the
It'll be
YouTube.
recorded for people to watch at a later date. So upload it on our website.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. 6 p.m. Founders Hall on the 2nd. All right. Does the city manager have anything to report other than that good report?
Mayor, council members, just a couple items. One, in regards to the natural gas prices, I've heard from several of you, as was mentioned earlier. I've been in touch with Marisol Espinosa from Southern SoCal Gas, and we'll be working out a time for her and others to present at the council for more of a question and answer. I do want to remind the council that as you hear from residents that are struggling, that we do have the Neighbors in Need through the Rotary program. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that the city contributes funds to that program. And we know from their reports that they're sitting on some funds from even previous years that could help, especially those who are in most need right now. And we don't want our residents to not have that assistance available to them. So please share that with them. If you do have inquiries about that, feel free to contact staff and we can help them navigate that process too with Rotary. Then the only other thing I wanted to touch on, council members, was Captain or Chief Smith mentioned this earlier. We had a wonderful tabletop exercise on Zonehaven yesterday. It included Chief Smith and Megan. We also had a representative from Lost Hill Sheriff, and then Bennett Cummings from Office of Emergency Management. A great opportunity to have those county partners in the room and do an exercise where it's safe. It's confined to that, and we can, see where we're making some mistakes and correct now before we're in the middle of an emergency. And so we appreciated that partnership. We were the first city to do this with the Office of Emergency Management, and Bennett Cummings put together a wonderful presentation. We'll be sharing that with council just so you can see that. But what he enjoyed about the exercise is now, even going through that, he knows how to take that to other cities so they can also have that tabletop exercise and practice it as well. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you very much. That's great. All right. I know I've heard at least 2 council members have future agenda items. I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Weintraub.
Thank you. So on the COG, there's inconsistencies with what COG representatives are able to do without taking things back to their individual councils. So I wanted to have that discussion with our council. Legislation comes up and some COG members feel they have the authority to vote on the legislation before discussing it with their council. It's always been my practice to come back to the council, but sometimes that slows things down for the COG. So I just thought we could have that discussion, and Terry Dipple is happy to come, and Aniko Gold is the president of the COG. I'm the vice president right now, but even Aniko said she would accompany Terry to kind of share more with the council on this issue.
Okay.
So
I would support that as well.
Okay.
Can I request that you modify that to include other organizations like the league committees that David and I are on? We'd like the same direction. So
Yeah.
this can be a broader discussion.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Okay, Council Bazagia. I'm
Just
sorry.
technically,
Wait, we don't have a vote on
the
that.
league policy committee, you guys are free to do what you want because you're not council appointees.
Right.
You're appointees of other agencies.
Okay.
But yes, we could have the discussion regarding the other liaisons and task forces, sure.
Okay. That would be great. And then just wanted to follow up to make sure that Edison could still come talk to us. And we have a new rep for AT&T who seems really responsive, but I thought we could get some more information from AT&T about the last outage that they had after the rains. It left a group of our residents without service for multiple days, and just some changes that should happen if that happens in the future. So it'd be great to hear from AT&T, and still want to follow up with Edison on their last outage.
I would second that. And I think we gave you some specifics before of what we're looking for from Edison before they come speak to us.
Okay. And on AT&T also, are you seconding?
I would second AT&T as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can have a workshop with all the utilities coming. Okay. Councilmember Bazagian, you had something.
Yes, a couple of things. Just so I'm clear, the natural gas price thing, is Marisol coming here?
That was my conversation with her today, is that we would invite her to a council meeting, correct?
Okay, good. That's what I was going to ask for. On the public safety issue, I'd like that discussion to happen sooner rather than later, so we're ready to order some more services if that's the way we want to go. Did the Public Safety Commission, I know they met last week, did they discuss this at all?
No, that was not on their agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to move this along, because when the freeze is lifted, which I think is going to be soon, I want to be able to get those services if the council majority wants them, rather than have to wait behind other cities. Third item, I noticed today we did not have a sheriff's deputy in the room. That is something the council has repeatedly stated. I would like to make sure that we have a sheriff's deputy every single time for the entire meeting. We just went through discussing the horrible things that have been happening around us, and we have been without a sheriff's deputy all night, and that's not acceptable. And fourth, the budget committee, when you meet, could you come back with a kind of a cost estimate as to what it would cost to contract with a lobbyist? We've discussed that several years in a row, but we've never actually seen the cost. So I'd like to at least have us be able to consider that at a future time when the budget comes. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councilmember Albrecht, do you have anything? All right. Councilmember Kraut.
Nothing tonight.
Okay. I think we have plenty on and some future items that I would like to see moved up a little bit, but I will spend more time and bring those up later. So at this point, seeing nothing further, we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is February 8th, 2023 at 7 p.m. and it is 9:30. Thanks very much, everyone.